What killed the dinosaurs?
You. This is where Solar comes in. Who is Solar? Glad you've asked. Solar is a planetary future group that we as a species will advance to new heights. Voting for the others might be a mistake or regret that was not your choice that you were thinking within their name. Or another term for tyranny is the corruption within the government. So we as a group will spread this power to other parts of the world and to other leaders to prevent corruption and fragile peace.
Let's look at some forms of tyranny. Hitler was a successful leader but in the worst way of killing millions of Jews. But how did he rise to power in a matter of decades? The reason is that other people had same beliefs as him, in return they voted. As with Putin, he used manipulation tactics to gain his access to power. This is what many of our competitors will do, so we will have a peaceful approach to this.
There is going to be over 9 billion people in our world, waiting to be fed. So our solution is to create a dome-shaped enclosure where we can grow our crops and sustain other animals in it. Piled into this big food chain, we will have many volunteers to help us deliver the food to poor areas in the world.
For the humans, we cannot stop violence in general. So the reward of helping people is much greater than robbing an entire bank. Your tax will rise by 200% if you kill someone/injure them in an intentional way. This may stop the acts of crimes because it prevents the person doing the action from doing any more damage. If you did something impactful, 10% tax decrease. Any other crimes will be punished by showing an education video of what their actions are doing to the environment and others.
However, pollution still remains a large problem. So we need to have all the power we can use, even if it includes nuclear power plants. Renewables alone cannot support enough energy to power all of humanity. This clip will sum up my point.
The other alternative to fossil fuels is nuclear, and even though it's not renewable, its greenhouse gas emissions are tiny compared to burning stuff. But in the last 20 years, nuclear has basically stagnated. Countries like China, India and South Korea built new reactors, while Germany and Japan have been actively taking their nuclear plants offline. Which seems a bit weird if we look at the countries with the most low-carbon electricity in the world that get most of their juice mainly from two sources, nuclear or hydropower. Take France and Sweden. In France, only around 10% comes from fossil fuels, while 67% comes from nuclear and 23% from renewables, primarily hydro. In Sweden, almost 30% comes from nuclear power and about 45% from hydro. So we know that nuclear energy can work at scale.
A mix of nuclear energy and renewables is a key to stop climate change. But even with hard efforts, the production of fossil fuels might increase. So a desperate option to buy time is geoengineering. Kurzgesagt, go on.
The stuff that's interesting for geoengineering is sulfur dioxide, a nasty-smelling and invisible gas. High in the atmosphere, it produced a haze of sulfuric acid droplets that mixed with water and created giant veils. These veils reduced the sunlight reaching Earth's surface by roughly 1%. Global average temperatures dropped by 0.5 degrees Celsius. It took 3 years until this cooling effect had stopped. Humans could imitate this process by injecting sulfur particles directly into the stratosphere. According to some scientists, this might be surprisingly easy to do, and we don't even need a lot of new technology for it. According to one study, it also might be pretty cheap compared with the costs of rapid climate change. A small fleet of specialized aircraft could ascend once a year and distribute aerosols along the equator from where they would be spread around the world. Projections assume that injecting between 5 and 8 megatons of material per year would reflect enough sunlight to slow down or even stop global warming, giving us precious time to transition away from fossil fuels. Unfortunately, there might be a few unhappy side effects. There are a number of potential issues with aerosol injections. Rainfall patterns could change, which could negatively affect agriculture and cause famine. billions of people could be affected in the worst case. Also, after the 1991 Mount Pinatubo eruption, the acid water veils not only cooled down the surface, they also heated up the stratosphere. As it turns out, acid is bad for the ozone layer, and the ozone hole over Antarctica was the largest it has ever been.
Geoengineering is more of a gamble than a planet saver for global warming. It will only be used in the worst-case scenario. It'll either speed up our self-destruction or make time for the switcheroo from fossil fuels into lower emissions.
Conclusion. Geoengineering is a scary concept. It's not a solution to climate change, and it might even be a welcome excuse for the fossil fuel industry to delay the end of the fossil fuel age. Over the last few decades, geoengineering has been so controversial that it's stopped many scientists from doing the experiments necessary to understand it better. But blankly opposing geoengineering is short-sighted. The sad truth is, we are already running a geoengineering experiment. We're testing how fast the world changes if we add about 40 billion tons of CO2 each year. This experiment is about to get really exciting. Hopefully, we'll never have to use geoengineering. But if we need to in the future, we better have done the science. We better be prepared. Or a panicking humanity might accidentally press the self-destruct button.
Elon Musk trying to colonize Mars and a possible second Earth, Venus.
So then coming to Mars, Mars is definitely a fixer-upper of a planet. It's not perfect, but feasible. I mean, it's got a rotational period of 24.5 hours, so remarkably similar to Earth. It's got just under half Earth's gravity, so it's a lot closer gravitationally. It's got a lot of water ice. Almost all of Mars has water bound up in ice form in the soil. The soil has turned out to be non-toxic based on probes that we've sent there, so you could theoretically add, if you had a greenhouse and some fertilizer and you just sort of warm things up and pressurized it a little bit, then you could grow plants on Mars.
We think it's a great idea and fully supporting the colonization on Mars. Humans wouldn't have to deal with the long days since it's almost the same as ours. But humans could actually walk on Mars and not worry about stuff. Besides radiation, of course, but terraformation would fix it quickly. A different gravity which is half as ours would change our bone shape and our overall selves. On a plus side, we wouldn't have to worry about overpopulation.
Venus could be another planet that we can live on. But first we need to put Venus in the shade. Once the planet has cooled over decades, we need to shoot all the CO2 into a small moon using mass drivers, electric rails. A moon named Europa will supply our water by using the same mass drivers to shoot them to Venus with the assistance of space tethers, slings that launch on both ends. Once it reaches the planet, it gets some of that frozen CO2 and shoots it back to the nearby moon for storage.
Using the same tactic, we can launch excess nitrogen away from the planet to help us get closer to make Venus habitable. Using mirrors with our existing ones, the ones that puts Venus in the shade/stabilize with strategic angles to stop it from crashing, to heat up the sun and give a day/night cycle. Then we will drop trillions of cyanobacteria to give oxygen and fertilizer for future life. Then we need to grind some rocks to give soil for future plants on Venus. This terraformation is now done.